What's happening, gang? Back live in the Secret Stash. Hopefully got you all caught up on our CBS Sports Talk. I mean, after all, Steve, this is ESPN Radio, right? We got to get the sports up. Good. Gang, hanging out with some cool local people, talking about some important local stuff. I feel like we fit that bill today pretty good, Adrian. Marilyn Shea in the house, a state preservation group. Marilyn, I don't even know where to begin right now in sort of distilling the ground we've covered. Like, we hit so much stuff in the first segment. I feel like got the gist of wills are really bad. If you got a will, probably not enough. And then the one that I think I see most often, which is the idea that joint tenancy is probably stinks just about as bad as wills do with respect to holding title, right?
Right.
And so trust is a great panacea for both those. By the way, if you missed any of those, you can catch them on the rebroadcast over at secretstashradio.com. Any questions for Marilyn? Go ahead and feel comfortable posting them over on our Twitter handle at Follow the Stash. We're actually streaming this show live right now. And Marilyn, before the break, I sort of framed out that idea of disability. It's a thing no one wants to talk about right now, especially when you start entering into the conversation money and care and all the different myriad of plans and the Medi-Cal and remember all that stuff. This is something that you are an expert at.
Yes,
and so I wanted to get your take on this. You mentioned at the top of the show, 60% over 65 spend time in a nursing facility.
Right. It could be as low as 3 days. It could be 12 years. And so we want to plan for that because Medicare does not pay for that.
Yeah.
Your insurance policy, whether it's Kaiser or Blue Cross or whatever, does not pay for that. They only pay for skilled care. They don't pay what's called custodial care. Custodial care is when the nurse's aides are taking care of you and you're in the facility. Maybe it's after your surgery. Maybe it's because you have dementia. Alzheimer's, a type of common dementia. There's other kinds of dementia. Could be that you had a stroke, but you're in the nursing home, and guess who's paying for it? You are.
And that's the thing, too. So first of all, the things I've noticed is rarely do people think about this when they're getting their long-term care in place. Right.
Well, you have a choice here. Okay. You can, when you're young and healthy and can afford it, you could buy a long-term care policy. Now, I'm not in the insurance business. I can recommend people that do long-term care if you want something like that. But as an alternative, there's two alternatives. One would be that you just spend down. A couple can have $119,000 of cash, or an individual can have $2,000 of cash. And then you can get government help. But maybe you have more than that. Maybe you have a house and you have $200,000 or $300,000, or maybe even a little bit more. We can do documents for you that allow us. We'll do a special power of attorney. It's 35 pages long, along with your trust. It allows us to do planning if necessary, if you or your spouse need long-term care. It certainly beats going broke. Because we're talking about, in San Diego, the average cost of care is $84,000 a year. So you can see that it wouldn't take long to run out of money.
Yeah.
So we can do a plan that will allow us maybe for you to have private care for a period of time and then convert to something where the government will be helping you.
And especially because most folks that are in that conversation, they're not in their prime earning years anymore.
Right.
You know, so it's not just like 84, but I'll make that back next year because I'm a spry, youthful guy in the middle of my peak years. It's usually like you're on fixed income by that point in time, and then you're upside down.
Right. Most of us can't afford to pay $84,000 a year for our spouse's care. It's very, very expensive. And that's just the average. Okay. And, you're dealing with a lot of issues here. It's very difficult to watch, for example, with Alzheimer's, a loved one losing their mind, essentially. I do have a lot of clients that come via the Alzheimer's Association because they recommend me as one of their attorneys in San Diego to do this kind of planning.
That's great.
Let me just tell you a story about a family.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Mr. and Mrs. J, okay? They did a trust about 15 years ago. And then about 10 years ago, they decided that they needed a trust that had some more protection along with this special power of attorney that I talked about, the 35-page document. And then Mrs. J was starting to get very forgetful. She was starting to get Alzheimer's. And so 8 years ago, she went into a facility, and she lived there, and her husband visited her there every day. And and she died. It was sad, but she really completely lost her mind by the time she died. And so it was like he lost his wife before she had ever died. And then we have an issue, okay? We have a claim from Medi-Cal. This is a true story. $364,000. And so what are we going to do to avoid that claim? Well, we can do
This is for the custodial care that she got?
Right.
Yeah.
And she's gone now. And Mr. J is looking. In fact, the Medi-Cal office actually called my office the other day and said, what is his plans to repay it? And I says, well, he needs to live in the house right now, and he needs his money for his lifetime, and we'll deal with your claim later. But you know what? There's not going to be much of a claim because we're in the middle of passing the... I'm actually kind of mixing two stories right now. But with the J's, we're actually... we actually transferred it to the children. The family yesterday was at Mr. and Mrs. F, okay? And Medi-Cal called about them. But with the J's, Mr. J recently passed away. And we have grieving children. But they were so happy and giving me lots of hugs because over the last 15 years, we did all these documents for them. And we saved them from a claim of $364,000. So they're able to hold on to that house. And we're avoiding a claim completely. And Medi-Cal is going to get $64.17 because that was what was left in the checkbook at the end of their lives.
And that was because of how you structured the documents?
Right.
Wow.
And how we did things.
Now, what would have happened absent of those documents?
Medi-Cal would have gotten their $364,000.
And they would have taken the house if they couldn't pay it. Couldn't have
right.
paid it.
Well, put it this way. By the time the house was worth $40,000, by the time you paid the real estate claims, there's not going to be much. It'll be sold. And... they might be $500 left or something for the children.
Yikes.
So.
That's a pretty big swing.
Right.
The Power of the Documents with Marilyn Shea. We could maybe even retitle the show, The Power of the Documents with Marilyn Shea. If those are documents that might be important to you or your loved ones, you might want to reach out to Marilyn directly. You can call her at 760-721-0600. I'll get that number one more time, 760-721-0600. And you're right up in Oceanside, aren't you, Marilyn?
I am, right off the freeway.
What was that second story you were telling? Was that worth telling about the Mr. F?
Oh, no. Mr. F, we're in the middle of transferring the assets to the children. In fact, it's kind of interesting because we had a meeting and it looked like all 5 of them wanted a part of it. And then one of them said she didn't want it because she was afraid he's going to live in it as long as he can. She's afraid that if he has to go into a facility that she's going to be stuck paying for a new water heater or a new roof or something. And, it's possible because she's the only one that has cash. On the other hand, if it's a water heater, they can probably all cough up enough money to pay for that. But in any event, he's going to have a right to occupy the house for his lifetime, and he's going to always have an intent to return home. Those are key words with Medi-Cal planning is intent to return home.
Yeah.
Now, there's lots of attorneys that sort of say they do Medi-Cal planning, and some of them put that language in their documents, but there's only a very, very few that have actually ever handled a case of Medi-Cal. So you wanted to deal with somebody that's had some experience in that area.
I got to be honest with you. We bump a lot of elbows with folks who do what you do in the course of our private business and even on this radio show. And I've never heard anybody specialize in that before. I thought that was one of the coolest things about going to your website.
It's not really a specialty, but it's a practice emphasis area.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And so we can't use the word specialty because that means something in the Bar Association. They have certain specialties.
My apology. Retraction.
Yeah, that's okay. It's just a clarification. I can't call it a specialty.
Yeah.
I can call it a practice emphasis area.
Now, you said earlier about 60% over 65 spent a little bit of time in a nursing facility at some point in their lifetime. My curiosity is about what percent, I'm not asking that the stat has even been done, but in your experience, what percent of people don't realize that their long-term care policy doesn't include custodial?
Well, the long-term care policies do include custodial if it's an actual insurance policy, but you have to meet some criteria, as far as there's different things called activities of daily living. So most people don't have long-term care policies. They just think that their children are going to take care of them.
That is their
plan.
Policy, yeah.
Their plan is that their kids are going to take care of them because they took care of their kids when they were little. But guess what? the kids have lives of their own. And as long as you're mobile and you're walking around or even on your walker or in your wheelchair and you can still come to the dinner table, it's fine. But once you're bedridden, do you really want your kids to have to give up their life and spend 24/7 taking care of you?
Right.
That's not really fair, is it? So it's good to make plans so that, one family did have a plan. They had 6 daughters. They were all RNs. Okay, now they had a plan because the 6 daughters could take turns taking care of mom and dad. But most of us don't have 6 daughters or sons that are RNs to take care of us, do we?
Or that are willing.
Right.
Yeah, a whole nother heuristic. That's why we're hanging out with Marilyn Shea. Marilyn, you've done such a fantastic job at bookending both ends of this spectrum to make sure that we don't delay and begin our real estate plan today.
Estate planning.
I'm saying real estate plan because that's what I do. It's sort of on the tip of my tongue. But Marilyn does estate planning. So why don't we just say this? Don't delay and begin your real estate plan and your estate plan today. And then we both win.
That's a good winning strategy. I like that.
Don't delay, begin your estate plan today. Marilyn, I don't really know what more we can cover, but I feel like we're going to have to do a final round. We'll call it the final thoughts, right? So we'll sort of wrap this whole conversation up and then make sure that the folks know how they can get in touch with you or any cool stuff you got coming up. Real Talk Radio San Diego, gang. You're hanging out in the stash. We'll be right back with Marilyn.